What's up, true Zoinked warriors? It is I, he whose mids shall not be scooped, Taylor from Merlock, back with another riff breakdown. Today, I'm going to be covering Where No One Goes, which is the most recent single off of Onward Strides Colossus. The album's out February 24th. It's massive. It's got huge riffs. You're going to want to check it out. We did release a live version of this song already on You Cannot Be Saved, so you might be familiar with it. But if you're not, we're going to be diving into the intricacies of the track today. So, before we get started, if you hate the big riff industry as much as I do, be sure to like and subscribe. It is the most brutal way to punish our mortal enemy. So this is the first track we wrote for Onward Strides Colossus, and it marked a real shift for us sonically and kind of signified a maturization of our songwriting process. It's also the first track we wrote in a drop tuning. It's our first track in drop A sharp, which gives us those beefy power chords that everyone loves, and also opens up a couple other voicing options for us that are really key to this song. Sonically, it was inspired by Tool's cover of No Quarter on their Salival release, and that's also where we get the name. And I actually think the Led Zeppelin version of that is one of the pioneering Doom tracks. It's not really talked about as a Doom track, but it's a long-form, slow, brooding song with some really heavy riffs, and I think that track definitely went on to influence a lot of post-metal bands, a lot of long-form songwriters. So even though that song's not really referenced a lot in the Doom community from what I've seen, I think it's a really influential. So in addition to that Tool, Led Zeppelin influence, that No Quarter influence, this track is also really inspired by the broader post-metal genre in general. Bands particularly like Mouth of the Architect, their first record was very important to me. And also Pelican, Neurosis, those big, epic, beefy post-metal bands. And if you're interested in the lyrics of this song, it is influenced heavily by John Milton, the famous poet from the 16th century. You're probably familiar with Paradise Lost, that epic poem in the English tradition that details the fall of Satan, the fall of mankind. Obviously, Merlock's not a religious band, but, we hail Satan, we worship Doom, and we also read John Milton. In that famous piece in Book 4, Satan gives a famous soliloquy in which he says, "Which way I fly is hell, myself am hell." So that is where I got the inspiration for the chorus, and I kind of built the rest of the song around there. Where Milton's poem is ultimately a tragedy, I do think Where No One Goes has a sense of hope at the end, where instead of just leaving the characters in these hellscapes, something beautiful and holy, for want of a better word, is found. So Where No One Goes starts off with kind of a recombobulated version of the melody from No Quarter, and it goes like this. As the rest of the band continues, I continue that melody, but I move that melody into the context of some power chords, and it sounds like this. The next riff is actually pretty nu metal in its leanings. I didn't really notice it at the time I wrote it, but as I was like listening to the radio, it's really similar to Stain's For You, which I think is very funny because that certainly wasn't my intention to draw inspiration from, but it's just a good radio friendly riff. And if Merlock is nothing else, it's radio friendly. From here, we move on to the real post-metal influence section, mostly inspired by Mouth of the Architect. Their album, The Ties That Bind, was one of the first really heavy post-metal albums I fell in love with when I was getting into the broader doom genre. It really blew my mind how they were able to create such a heavy, oppressive atmosphere with these giant, low-tuned walls of sound, while also creating this really catchy, melodically driven song. In particular, I was really inspired by the opener off of that album, which is called Baobab, and if you haven't checked them out yet, go ahead and give that track a spin. So the first riff that was influenced by Mouth of the Architect on this song is really chuggy and octave-driven, and it goes like this. And the second riff is a little more melodic and winding, and it goes like this. After this, we return to the chorus I just showed you before we lead into the bass interlude that signals the ending of the song. It has this really rad groove, and it's easy to bop your head to. And of course, at the end, we're going to bring it back slower. The last thing I want to talk about is the solo section, which was really inspired by Elder's Dead Roots Stirring. I think you can hear that kind of call and response melody really nicely. So those are riff breakdown for Where No One Goes. We also just put out a really rad music video for it, so if you haven't checked it out, it's going to pop up on the screen. And until next time, keep your minds cranked and your mids zoinked. Or